Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello and welcome to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Max 6 Conscious Workspace in Tempe, Arizona, where we help build businesses and connect you with the right people. I'm Karen Nowicki, and I am very excited to be spending time with my new friend, Lou Silverman. He's the owner of Silverman Law Offices. He's been practicing here in Tempe for a long, long time.
Yes, close to 40 years.
40 years. And
I know I don't look like it, but it's close to 40
a spring
years.
chicken.
Yeah.
So, Lou, are you an Arizona native or?
No, I'm from El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what brought you to Arizona?
College. Yeah, I came here to go to ASU.
And then never left.
All of my friends were navigating east to go to University of Texas. And I just thought, wow, these are the same people I've known through high school. I didn't really like them all that much then. Why am I going to like
Why would
them
I follow
later?
them?
So I just decided to come west.
On your own?
Well, yes, I had a sister out here.
Okay.
So I had a landing place,
Yeah.
So
A safe place to land.
A little bit, yeah.
Is she still in the area?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah.
She's a local business person. She has an interior design business.
Wonderful.
And my brother-in-law has been a real estate developer in Tempe, more or less retired now.
Uh-huh. But
yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, all the changes in Tempe. I've been here since
Yeah.
79. My dad moved us out here when I was going into the 8th grade. And we had only planned to be here for 3 years. We've now all
Now
raised
you're
our
here.
own kids here. My dad's
Yeah.
still in Tempe. I went to McClintock High School. But it's fascinating, the development. Even though we're fairly close to the ASU area, I'm not in that area very often. But
Yeah.
when I drive by, I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah. It blows me away to be around campus and just see what's particularly north of campus.
Yes.
It's not recognizable anymore.
It's not. And
Yeah.
yet, as a young student coming in when things are normal and kids are, on campus and enjoying the Tempe Town Lake and all
Mhm.
that, what a beautiful, fun place to
Mhm.
come and learn.
Yeah.
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 So tell us about your journey in law. Tell us, we've got all the time. I would love to get to know you. Tell us
Okay.
about your original practice, which was general practice, right?
Correct.
For 20 years?
Give or take.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
tell us about that. What got you interested in law? And then what are you doing today?
Wow.
Yeah, we've got listen, I got all day.
Do we have 4 hours?
The Reader Digest version.
Okay. Well, okay. What got me interested in law was the fact that I was born in a family of lawyers. My dad was a practicing lawyer in El Paso. He died when he was 82, and he was still practicing law. So he was just the kind of guy that he just really was the old-fashioned Atticus Finch. He just loved it. My mom graduated law school in 1937-ish from the Brooklyn Law School, but her story is more of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg story, is that she graduated law school when lawyers were not being hired by anybody, women lawyers. So, I mean, she really had no place to go to be a woman lawyer. She was offered like secretarial jobs, but she ended up coming out smelling like a rose because she ended up becoming a buyer for a department store. I think it was called Franklin's. She lived in Brooklyn, so it was in that area.
Yeah.
But she got a great job for that era, post-Depression. She traveled around and went to the department stores as a buyer. I mean, I've seen pictures of her. She was dressed to the nines, so. But anyway, I grew up in a family that was legally educated, and so it was kind of genetic almost,
Yeah. And general practice made sense in the beginning
Mhm.
for a good 20 years or so.
I think for a lot of young lawyers, you kind of fall into that. I need a job. I don't really know exactly what I want to do. Law school doesn't prepare you for those kind of decisions typically. And I ended up working for a small law firm in Phoenix and then moved to Tempe in about 84. And I had a practice on Mill Avenue. My partner was named David Richardson, so we were called Richardson and Silverman. And we're located where the restaurant Mexico ended up for quite a while.
Yeah.
Now I think it's a Del Taco or something like that in that building.
Right.
And so that's where I did, most of the 20, give or take, years of kind of jack of all trades, master of none. I did lots of civil litigation and jury trials and divorce and personal injury, and I did some real estate law. So, I mean, I learned all of that, and I could become relatively good at it. But then I finally realized that relatively good isn't really good enough. I
Mm.
mean, you've now played around for 20 years, every time that you're opposing somebody, they're basically better than you because that's all they do. So you're always scrambling, you're always feeling like you're behind the eight ball. So in about 2005, I decided that I wanted to switch my career to estate planning, estate administration, which is probate, trust administration, and things like that. So 2005 was kind of the trigger year for me.
Yeah. And what got you interested in that? Had you done a handful of cases?
Right. I had done a handful. I felt like I'd had enough real heavy duty adversarial work. I mean, divorce work is horrible. I mean, if you ever have a divorce lawyer on as a guest who's been doing it 20, 30 years,
They're spent.
their character has been, I mean, it wears on you. You need to take a spiritual recess from that. So I decided I just really didn't want to do that anymore. And I decided that estate planning, probate, well, the probate part, which is the court part, I felt like 20 years experience in civil litigation would lend well to probate and being in the courtroom and not feeling uncomfortable in the courtroom because many estate planners don't do probate. So it gave me a niche. But the estate planning part was a heavy duty educational part to become educated to the point that I finally felt like, wow, I know what I'm doing now. And I'm learning every day, so.
And it is and was exciting.
Yeah, it's been a good career. I mean, it's been now 16 years,
Yeah.
and it's just been pretty much exclusive.
Are you?
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, are you finding? We've had a lot of conversations, of course, about planning for retirement and planning for the event that you transition, and how do you have your family be ready, that sort of thing.
Right.
And the conversation frequently for folks is people put this off, right? No one
Right.
wants to plan for this. Are you finding that that's been consistent through the 16 years? Are we finding that people are getting more smarter and more savvy and willing to have those conversations more easy?
I would say the consistency of non-planning is still more prevalent. There's just a lot of reasons that people don't plan. Fear of the unknown, not knowing how to get going. It's like, how do I start? Also cost, people are cost conscious. Like, give you an example that I was working with some people who tried to do it themselves. So they put together a very well thought out, but very haphazard plan with tons of inconsistencies. And I reviewed it and I talked to him and I said, you're going to end up in court because there's going to be lots of ambiguity and you're going to need interpretation of what you're saying here. And so I said, you really need to do this correctly. And I went through that. And then finally I said, what's preventing you from just doing this correctly? And he said, I don't want to pay for it. So I said, well, I'm not sure how I can answer that because if you want it done correctly, you're going to pay for it.
Yeah, and you should.
And if you go to a low end, I hate to say paralegal services are low end because they have a market, but their market is not complex estate planning. And if you go to those kind of people and they just do a printout form document for you, you're wasting your money. So, I was trying to educate him, but you're going to have to pay for this because you have enough complexity in your estate.
Yeah.
Second marriages and children by first marriages and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big obstacle. And I suppose during the pandemic, as people were worrying about losing their jobs and all that, I mean, I can understand there was a delay.
Sure.
But there's a certain number of people that are still motivated and they really do want to get it done. And it's like, it's on their checklist, almost like a bucket list, because when they get it done, they feel relieved.
So much
by it.
relief.
Yeah.
I know I hadn't done mine for a long time and finally did it within these last 2 years. And I was like, wow, it's not something that I thought of often, but it's always kind of lingering in the background, that fear of what if.
What if? Yeah, because unfortunately, we could go at any time. I could have a heart attack as we're speaking. And, I don't think I'm going to. But if I didn't have a plan,
Yep.
I've left it to the whims of a lot of other people.
And I think
you know?
to finish up that conversation around why people might avoid it is I think we also, it's uncomfortable. We may not want to spend the money, but we also may feel like we're going to be around forever.
Yeah.
And that's the hope. But
Sure.
if we keep putting it off,
Yeah.
then something's going to sneak up on us quite possibly.
Yeah. So that mindset works as long as nothing happens.
Right. Right. But
I mean, I've had people come in and they'd say, I feel horrible because I've been putting this off for 20 years. And I said, well, the good news is that so far you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And you, so given that you've been in Tempe as long as you have, you have been recognized by Tempe Chamber and have participated in the leadership program. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Tempe Chamber and some of the success and joy you've had in being a member.
Yeah, I'll start my Tempe story a little earlier than that. I was working many years and I had young children. So my devotion to my work and my family and children kind of prevented me from become very civically involved. I always wanted to, but you
have to pick and choose.
Your plate's full. And then when my kids started to grow up and got a little bit older, I got an opportunity to serve on the board of Tempe Community Action Agency. Beth Fiorenza was the executive director at the time. And that was really a great insight to the city because Tempe Community Action Agency, provides services to people who are homeless, foodless, all that stuff. And I got to see how the community tries to serve those people. And I got to see how the city gets itself involved in that in terms of how funding occurs and who gets what money. So I was on that board for 6 years, and I met Paul Mittman, who was on that board, and he's the president of Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. He's asked me if I would be interested in serving on their board. So then I transitioned to their board, which I'm still on, have learned a lot about naturopathic medicine that I never knew anything about. Met some really great people on that board. And then going back to the Tempe leadership, Beth Fiorenza, when I was leaving the TCAA board in about, 7-8 years ago, so whenever that was, so 2012, 13, she said, you ought to try Tempe leadership. And I had never heard of it before. So I went ahead and applied, and I was accepted. And that was one of the best experiences I've had as an adult because you get so connected to the city and you learn so much about all the city departments and meet people with the city. And then the people you meet, not only in your own class, but other classes, you meet some remarkable people. And it opened my eyes to a lot in terms of what kind of people I like to hang out with and who I don't like to hang out with. And so Tempe Leadership was a really great experience. I was president of Tempe Leadership, I don't know, I'm going to guess 5, 6, 7 years ago. You don't remember after
what do you know what your class is?
I was 28.
Yeah, 28.
Yeah, I was 28.
I have yet to go through Tempe Leadership, but that is definitely something
Yeah.
I want to do. I'll be doing the Women in Business mentoring program as a mentor beginning, I think, next
Okay.
month, actually. So I'll get my hands wet in that. But
Yeah.
I've consistently heard what you've just shared, that Tempe Leadership is an incredible experience,
Mhm.
long-term friendships, the development of just personal growth, but also professional growth, and that deep connection with Tempe and that opportunity to give back and serve. So I hear that. I always hear at the Tempe Chamber events, when people introduce themselves, they'll say Tempe Leadership Class of XYZ, the best class. That's always the big
Yeah,
joke.
the best class
yeah,
ever. Yeah.
Exactly, best
Yeah.
class ever. So lovely.
So one thing that Tempe Leadership led me to is sort of my own little journey of leadership because I've become fascinated by the concept of how people become so successful, whether as leaders or sports stars. I grew up as a sports junkie, so I mean, I'm just, I have a tendency to just admire sports people too much, But like, how did Michael Phelps become so good that he's better than anybody in the world? To me, that's an amazing feat, right?
Yeah.
Do you golf?
I don't.
Okay, see, I'm probably the best golfer in this room,
For sure.
but there's only two of us in here.
Right.
I'm not the best golfer even on my own street. So the point being is, how do people get so good? So I started my own little journey called Tie-Dye Dialogues, where I'm interviewing people from my desk at work, at their desk, wherever they are. And it's been really interesting. I interviewed John Skelton, a former NFL quarterback, Paul Mittman, Dwayne Rowan, who's a dean at ASU, and Shireen Lerner, who's a real city community leader. And it's been a really fun experience, and I'm just absorbing from those people.
And I know Suki from the Tempe Chamber was the one who introduced us and said that you were doing these interviews, a great podcast, and you were curious as to what we were doing here. That is, to sit in those conversations like you've just described. I get to do it every single day, whether I'm hosting or I'm simply producing for one of my clients. Yeah. But I have learned so much in these 3 years from vast industries. And it sounds like your interviews, the common topic is leadership. Right? And how do you become the best of the best?
Yeah, and also how you handle success, but not only that, how you handle failure. Because, every leader fails. Every sports star fails. So how do you handle that? And how do you handle that in the big picture of life,
Yeah.
I've learned a lot.
You've been doing it for how long?
4 months, 5 months.
Oh, so fairly new.
It's been through the pandemic. Yeah. Because one thing I realized through this pandemic, because we went to mostly a Zoom platform, is that now you can talk to people who you'd never would otherwise get to talk to. Yep. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, for example, that I could pull off a 30-minute interview of Beto O'Rourke from Texas, because I grew up in El Paso, and he's from El Paso. There might be possible that I could get some connections that he would give me 30 minutes.
Well, we can help you with that.
I would love that.
We're really good at that. Absolutely.
I would love that. But so the point being is I could never have done that in person, right? Yeah. But now maybe he'll give me 30 minutes. So that's what I'm trying to do.
It's interesting. We have prided ourselves at Business Radio X at all the studios. So I'm a licensed partner. Mm-hmm. There's several across the country. Mm-hmm. It's always been, prior to COVID, this in-person experience. You're in the studio with me today. We're practicing safe social distancing. Right. And I'm still able to do it. But I also, when COVID hit, I had to get smart and think, okay, well, what about the clients that I have, my hosts, as well as their guests who are not comfortable coming in? They're immune compromised, or they just don't feel safe. So we've opened it up to Zoom, like you're doing. Yeah. And Joe Puz, Project Management Office Hours, he's the #1 project management show in the country. He's been with me for 3 years. We now have made it a practice that his guests come from all over the world. We just had his first guest from Africa this past week, and he was a TED speaker. I mean, just fascinating. Yeah. So we've all had to kind of shift, but how lovely that you can have these conversations with leaders far and wide, and then have this conversation around success and leadership and that drive. That's what I'm hearing. Yeah. Maybe your passion and excitement around athletes is that they are obvious to us that they have to become a craftsman of their sport and a craftsman of their own body, right? And then their mind and that sort of thing as well. So were you an athlete growing up?
I was a wannabe athlete.
Yeah.
I grew up watching and following every team I could follow, which back in those days was limited. Dallas Cowboys.
Yes.
Houston Astros. That was about all we got. We had no cable back in those days. But I just love sports. I love to play them. I love to watch them. And I had a great experience that kind of shaped my life. In 1966, when I was 12, 13 years old, the team from El Paso, which was then called Texas Western, won the national championship in basketball, which that game has become now known as the game that broke down the walls of racism. It started.
Yeah.
Didn't fix it.
We're not there yet.
Didn't fix it. But the team in El Paso, excuse me, the coach there, Don Haskins, when he came to El Paso, basically said, my goal is to win. I'm going to recruit the best players I can recruit. So he started recruiting from Gary, Indiana, and Brooklyn, New York, and places, Philadelphia. And he recruited a lot of really good black athletes. And that was back in the day when there wasn't one school in Texas to speak of that would had a black player. Mm-hmm. In the South, there were none. Black players had not yet started to go to Kentucky, North Carolina, et cetera. They were very limited to where they could go to school. as that team that year, 65, 66, progressed and just kept winning and winning and winning, it finally got on some radar. Like, wow, who are these guys? Well, to make a long story short, they made it to the finals against Kentucky, an all-white team, coached by a coach that had, was, I think, pretty well known to be a racist, Adolph Rupp. And it was just such a stark contrast. And then the Texas Western won, which made it. And then they just say after that, college just said, look, we got to play black players.
So good.
And that opened the door. You'll hear older black players being interviewed, and they'll say, man, whenever they got a chance to see any of those players on that team, they'd go right up to them and thank and shake their hand and say, man, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And I grew up in that. I mean, I was like a witness to that. I went to all those games back in those days. They let kids sit on the floor surrounding the stadium or the floor. I mean, it was a pretty neat experience.
Fun times.
And so it shaped me in the fact that I love sports, but that to be a witness of that historic moment and following that all my life has been pretty fun.
Yeah, I've often looked back too at what has influenced me around inclusion and wanting to help community and give everybody an opportunity. And there, I can think of stories like that throughout my life. Like, wow, what a rich opportunity. I've got a 13-year-old, I mentioned that to you off air, and two who have already grown and are living on their own. It's such interesting times right now that I keep looking for those opportunities with my son, either through a documentary or reading a book together or listening to one or, just getting out and doing things because he's so isolated right now. Online school is still happening and he's not a real fan of it, but he's showing up and doing it and, not able to go out and, play with his buddies like a normal 13-year-old would do. I have to keep reminding him, you're not the only one. Like everybody's experiencing this. But these are those opportunities, these experiences that shape our life. You had mentioned even with your grandkids, I believe you said, encouraging them to pay attention right now what's happening. Because share that if you would, please. That was such a neat story that really we're going to be looking at this time in history years from now, and it's going to be incredible. Yeah. We're living it right now. So keep our eyes open, right?
Yeah. My grandchildren are 9 and 7. I don't think they're old enough to start comprehending, maybe a little bit, but my daughter her stepchildren are 15 and 17. And I was telling them, you're living through one of the most incredible periods of our history that, years from now, you're going to be reading this and say, well, I was there. I remember that, So I said, you should, really, really be observing what's going on and reading about it. And because my example is that I was 15 years old in 1968 when all hell broke loose. And yet I wasn't observant enough. I was just sort of distant. I grew up in El Paso, not very many black people in El Paso. It's mostly Hispanic. So I really grew up mostly around Hispanic people. So this whole thing about the black movement and the riots and the murderers, like Martin Luther King and all these people, I was just relatively distant from it. I wish I had been more attentive, but I was a kid. But I am advising kids now, be attentive to it, know what's going on. It's amazing.
Well, and it's our role. It's our role as parents and grandparents to help our kids be aware.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what's lended to the problem that we feel like we are isolated and it's not our problem. It's not our issue.
Because we're not there.
Yeah. And I think I shared with you when we got to know each other not too long ago, I have co-hosted a show called Racism in Small Business and the Arts with two women who I've just grown to love. And they've been helping me really become aware of how isolated and narrow my thinking has been and how really that way of being has contributed to the systemic racism problem. So anyway, I'm fascinated by again, our journeys and how they shape who we are today.
Well, I'm not particularly thrilled about getting older. I know some people, have a lot of good positive things to say about it, and I'm okay with it. But one thing that I will say about it that's a real positive is that you learn and it shapes you. I am not the same person that I am today that I was, 20 years ago or 40, because I've learned and I've let it sort of sink in. I feel like I get things a little better, and I understand things a little better, and I'm not as narrow-minded.
Yeah.
When you grow up in a city of like El Paso, which was, even though it was heavily Hispanic, so when you grow up, certainly Hispanics are everywhere, but you're still narrow-minded. I mean, it's still out in the middle of nowhere. So I didn't know anybody who was homosexual. Nobody would have admitted it if they were, you know. It's just the environment, you know. It was kind of a cowboyish kind of town, you know. So I think in a lot of ways you just sort of broaden yourself, and that happens with age.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Because I know just as many people who, are getting up in their years and they're closed-minded and they're not willing to grow, or they think their time is up.
Yeah.
You had just kind of dropped this seed when you were telling a little bit about your journey, and I want to make sure we have a chance to talk about it. You are known as the tie-dye attorney?
Tie-dye lawyer.
Tie-dye lawyer.
Right.
And you can't see us if you're listening live right now or the podcast, but of course, when I saw Lou come in today, I'm like, yeah, of course, I've got the tie-dye lawyer with me because he's got a beautiful tie-dye shirt on and even has a sweatshirt with him, and it looks like a bat, or even your mask. Yeah?
My mask is tie-dyed, and then my
Yes.
sweatshirt is tie-dyed, and sometimes I try to get them to match.
So love it.
Yeah.
How does an attorney, which, we would typically think an attorney
Yeah.
would be very serious and yes,
Straight-laced.
right, and all very analytical. How does one fall in love with tie-dye and actually make that part of their brand?
Yeah, it's a good question. About 5 years ago, my wife and I were on the big island of Hawaii, and we were in the South of Kona, which gets fairly rural. In fact, a little town called Captain Cook. And I wandered into a shop where a fellow was tie-dyeing, and it was his home, and his home was a showroom, and in the back is where he did his work, like on a back patio. So I wandered back and was watching him and chatting, and I just was kind of fascinated by the process. So I could see this is what he's working on here, and then I can see on the shelves or the hangers what he's creating. I decided, I think I'm going to try that. So I came home. I bought a little kit from Michaels, which allows you to tie-dye barely one shirt. And then I did another, and then another. And then I decided, well, I need dyes. So the next thing, I bought $300 worth of commercial dyes. And I started watching YouTube videos to become like, what am I trying to do here? And just before you know it, I started giving them away. And then I would tell clients about it, or they'd look at my website and they'd say, well, I'd like one. So it kind of became a little bit of a novelty. And then I sold at 2 farmers markets over the past several years. Clark Park had a farmers market, and then the 6th Street Market. So I kind of established a little bit of an identity with this huge banner, tie-dye lawyer. And so it just kind of became a nice little niche. There's a lot of things that you could be known as, and I think tie-dye lawyer is better than a lot of them,
Especially when we're talking about attorneys,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So it's just a hobby, but it has sort of become connected to me. And admittedly, I sort of push the envelope by the fact
That
that,
shirt is gorgeous.
like, I'll take a white man's shirt and I'll create more of a work of art out of it. And then I wear it to work, and people say, I love that shirt, So I think in a sense, it allows men to realize that, I can be as colorful as a woman's dress. I mean, a woman can wear a colorful dress. Why can't I wear a colorful shirt? So that's kind of what I'm trying to do a little bit, is expand the horizon. And I know that tie-dye is becoming more popular. I mean, I
Again.
see it now advertised more.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Dillard's, and they had a tie-dye shirt that was just really 3 colors, nothing fancy, for $67, a T-shirt. And I thought, are you kidding me? I mean, I sell mine for $20,
Yeah.
So,
And where can we find them? They're on your website. You
well, I'm
mentioned.
creating a tie-dye lawyer website.
Okay.
So I am creating one, tiedyelawyer.com. It's in the process. My Facebook page is where I've been posting most of
Perfect.
my stuff. And that's just Lou Silverman on Facebook. People can just see a ton of what I've been doing. And then I'll do, custom things. That's the most fun. Like, if you were to tell me, I love that sweatshirt, could you make me something like it? Yeah, then I could do that,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a shop, SWIHA, Southwest Institute of Healing Arts. They have a bookstore, and they have my stuff in there.
Wonderful.
So that's really the only retail that I'm doing.
Yeah, but you're doing
But
it.
I'm doing it. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
doing it. Yeah.
You've got this beautiful blend between the right and left brain,
Yes.
right? And have you always
Yeah.
been like that? Have you always been creative, or have you really made that a intention?
Yeah. You know what I think happened when I saw the tie-dye guy and then decided to come home and do it is that I think it sparked whichever side of that brain is. I get confused. Is that right brain
Right
or
side.
that right side? Because my left side, I kind of view it as probably being swollen and worn down by the years of being a lawyer. You know, being a lawyer is extremely analytical and factual based and creative, but in a different sort of way. Like I've come up with some, really good epiphanies as a lawyer that were like, wow, that was a good one. But in the tie-dye world, it just allows me to just always feel like I can be creative and there's no bad consequences. The worst tie-dye is not going to hurt anybody,
Right.
right?
Right.
And the best tie-dye is, wow, I love that,
Yeah.
So
fun. And I'm sorry, how long have you been doing that?
about 5 years.
Okay, again,
Yeah.
fairly new.
So when the pandemic started and people were starting to hunker down, I started randomly, I made a list of people that were my friends, and I would mail them a tie-dye with a short note like, I hope this brightens your
Aw.
day, So I was enjoying doing that.
Oh, I bet they love that.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
it struck me how easy it is to make somebody's day bright. It doesn't take much. So if making somebody a shirt and popping it in the mail is going to make them have a nice day, that's a pretty nice contribution,
For sure.
Yeah. So.
And not only does it bring a smile to their face and warm their heart, but also we as the giver,
Mhm.
it does wonders for us too, doesn't
feel
it?
good about it.
Yeah.
Like I've sent something out. Now it's in the mail to some people in Houston. I always like to figure, God, if I could watch them open it, I would love it because they don't know what it is. It's like Silverman Law. What the hell am I getting from Silverman Law? And then they open it up and,
I
so,
love it.
yeah.
So fun. Tell me more about leadership and for you specifically, has there been a formula for you for creating a highly effective practice? I mean, like what's
Yeah,
it
you
been
know,
for
you know what the formula's been? When you come to the fork in the road, take it. You try to have a plan and you want to have a goal and you want to have success, but every day you got decisions to make that affect whether that path is going the right direction or the left direction, or the wrong direction. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything. I knew that when I transitioned back in 05, 06, that I wanted to become, really, really good at what I was doing. So my goal was to become board certified by the state bar, which is a process that you've got to have been in that practice for 10 years, pretty much exclusively. Then you've got to take some exams. And then if you pass the exams, they board certify you. So I did that about 6 years ago. I got board certified.
And you've been recognized statewide.
Well, I don't know about the statewide part.
Oh, I think so. I've read your bio and I've seen what you've been up to. But really, because you became, I'll use the word expert.
Yeah.
You've been acknowledged for that, and you didn't set out for that acknowledgement necessarily,
No.
but to learn the craft and become really good at what you did.
Yeah, I think the byproduct of learning the craft and become really good at what you do, and then also wanting to share that, like I do webinars for an outfit called National Business Institute. They're out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So before the pandemic, it was fun. I'd fly to Minneapolis, drive over to Eau Claire, 90 minutes, and they had a beautiful studio, not too different than what you've got here, but their studio looked like a little newsroom. They had two of them. And so you'd spend the day filming your webinar with usually one or two other lawyers, and then they show it later. So that was a fun experience because I got to go to the Midwest. I got to go fishing at lakes I would never have gone fishing in and golfing at golf courses. But the pandemic has made that not so much fun. Now it's all remote.
Yeah.
But I've done a lot of them. I probably have done about 50 of them now.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, I've got a massive amount of written material.
Yeah.
So some of those articles have been published in Estate Planning Magazine. So those are national. So that's,
Not
but those
just,
are just,
not just regional.
those
or
are just
statewide.
basically the articles that I have written for my webinar students, just being published in a magazine.
Love that, though.
Yeah.
Repurpose, right?
Yeah.
That's how we can put ourselves out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, just giving people good service. I think if you give people good service, they know it. I hope.
They do.
Yeah.
And then that's when they tell their friends,
Yeah.
right? When somebody is in a similar situation, they're going to say,
Yeah.
you need to call Lou.
Yeah. Estate planning is not a transactional process. A transactional process is buying a house or buying a car, because it's all basically a contract that you're going to fill in. You know you want the house, but it's already there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Estate planning for me, is getting to know the client in a way that they probably almost get a little uncomfortable after a while. But if I don't know the client and what their issues are, I can't plan. So that if you had a special needs child, but you're embarrassed, like, I don't like to tell anybody about that, well, then I can't plan for you. So I'm hitting some hot spots, and sometimes people, will cry during the process, but they know that they've really, really spent some quality time so that I can now help them. So that's my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like your father, do you think you'll be at this for a long time?
Unfortunately, economically, yes. Divorce has an effect like that. So I don't go into any more detail other
Sure.
than I'll be working. Yeah.
Well,
But you know what the good news
me
is?
too.
Yeah. I don't know how old you are, and I don't really, I'm not going to ask you, but I do know that age is what it is, but nothing about my age right now has made me any less of a good lawyer. I'm a better lawyer than than I was 10 years ago or 20, because again, I've absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
As long as my physical and mental abilities allow me to be at this level, I'm great. God knows what could happen.
Well, and how many, and I can't remember if you and I spoke about this, and I'm going to forget the name of the groups, but there are these longevity groups,
Yeah.
right? Are you involved in any of that? Yeah,
No.
I'm familiar with it. I have some friends who are very involved, like this idea that really, age is just a number, and
Yeah.
if you continue to take care of yourself nutritionally and exercise and keep your mind, malleable, we're golden.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I exercise, not enough, but I exercise. I've been real careful with my diet lately, So yeah, all of this is just a plan to try to be around, and not only be around, but to be relevant,
And be relevant.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do you have a book, or is there a book in you?
The book that I would write would be a total fictional lawyer story. I've started one, but I'm in the first chapter, and I've never really made any
Yeah.
progress with it. But it actually was based on something happened in my career, if I could tell the story. The law firm that I was with in the early 80s down up in Phoenix at Camelback and 7th Street, I think, we had a walk-in, and I was the low man on that law firm totem pole. So the walk-in was an old man, and he had bad dentures. They were clattering, and he wanted to see a lawyer. So they said, would you mind seeing this man? I said, okay. So I saw him, and his story was that he was living on an allowance from the VA, that he was wealthy, but that the VA wasn't giving him enough to live on, so that he actually had to take a taxi ride. He'd give the taxi driver a watch. So I said, well, let me look into it. Let me just see what's going on. And I thought the guy was nuts. So I made some calls to the VA and was able to speak to somebody, and turned out they were his guardian. They had been appointed by the court as his guardian and conservator. He was a veteran. And, he's basically a harmless old guy that just wanted to have enough money to go to Denny's and, just take taxi rides. But they weren't giving him enough money to do that. So I said, well, how much are you giving him? They said blank. I said, well, I think he needs double that, honestly. He's giving his watches away for taxis.
And he shouldn't have to do that.
And he shouldn't have to do that. So I said, okay, we'll do that. So I solved the guy's problem. And he was happy, never saw him again. So the book story idea that I had was that a lawyer, a fictional lawyer sort of like me gets a letter in the mail from a law firm from another city that says, so-and-so has passed away, I'm sorry to tell you, but in his will, he has given you an assignment. He had a $7 million estate, just to tell you, this man was not poor. And he believed in his latter years that somebody was targeting him to kill him because it had to do with his previous military service. And he figured that they were going to eventually get him. And so his assignment to you is that you find and bring his killer to justice, and you inherit the full $7 million. But you've got a 2-year period to do it.
You must write that
So
story.
I got that far, and then I thought, okay, I like the story, but I'm not sure where I'm going to go with it.
That's good. It's compelling. I'm on the edge of my seat like, okay, I want to hear more.
I know, I do too, but I don't have it yet.
Oh, that's so good. Well, I trust that if you decide that that's what you want to do, you'll do it with zest and with all your heart like you've done with tie-dye and, of course, your career.
What I'm thinking of, and now I'm just giving the story away to anybody who wants, but go ahead, take it, I don't care, is that what I'm thinking of where I'm going to go with it is that he was on the Secret Service team for JFK, and he knows who killed JFK. And so whoever wanted to stop him, that was the secret that they were trying to prevent him from spreading. So that's where I'm thinking of going.
This is a must read.
Yeah, that's where I am right now.
Okay, well, good.
Okay.
Well, just much
I'm going to sign and give you the first copy.
I would love that. I would be honored.
Okay.
It'll be that little surprise in the mail that comes from Lou Silverman. I'm like, what is Silverman Law sending me?
And with a mask.
Right, and the tie-dye mask.
Yeah.
I love it. This has been a fun conversation. Let's round up our conversation, telling our listeners a little bit more about your practice.
Okay.
From civil litigator and general practitioner to specializing in estate planning, trust administration, and probate law.
Right.
Are you actively working with new clients?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
They're the lifeblood of our practice.
Yeah.
Certain businesses have a lot of repeat clients. So once they can kind of reach a max out, financial advisors can actually reach a point that their book of business is so large that they don't even need any new clients. It's a repetitive, pay cycle. But we don't have anything like that. So although we help people all the time in updating and administrations on death and all that,
you need the new
but
flow.
the lifeblood is always new flow. Yeah.
And how does that conversation start with you? And is there a particular individual or family that best fits the practice? Tell us a little bit about those things.
I don't think so. I think we service younger people with really simple things. So, for example, I have a 30-year-old daughter who at this point doesn't need a lot of complex stuff, but she needs a healthcare power of attorney. She needs a financial power of attorney. Because those are critical, because if you become incapacitated, and you can have that happen through an accident, and you don't have those in place, then the court gets involved to appoint a guardian and a conservator, and that's expensive and intrusive. If you just have those powers of attorney in place, you avoid that. If you have a will, you can direct where your assets want to go. What I often see is that people have a lot of beneficiary designation type of assets like life insurance, IRAs and things, but they're not consistent. They don't even know who their beneficiaries are. They've created them so long ago, or they didn't really know what they were doing, and so they'll make an IRA payable to their estate, estate of me. Well, that's not a good choice because they're taxable, and we want to be able to get the best tax results out of IRA distribution. So, all the way up to we've got some clients, it's pretty hefty numbers, $50, $75 million net worth. Now, those are much more complex. But the typical client, I would say, is 1 to 5 million, 7 million, in that general range.
Yeah.
We don't turn people away.
And the conversation with you and the folks in your practice, is it just, hey, give us a call and let's see if we're a good fit? Is that where it begins?
The way we like to do it is we send out to a prospective client about a 6 or 7 page worksheet. And it has on it their own personal info, their children. And we ask, what are the children doing? How old are they? Where do they live? Do they have any issues, special needs?
Sure.
And then we ask them to at least give us a good summary of assets so that we understand, is this person coming in with a net worth of $500,000 or $5 million, because that affects our advice. It doesn't affect the fee, and people are worried about that. It's like, well, if I tell them that I'm worth $7 million, they're going to hit me with a big fee. It's like, get that mindset away. We're not doing it for that purpose. Then we have an initial meeting, whether now by Zoom or in person, and we don't charge for that. That's how we determine if we're a good fit. So if they want to go forward from there, then we'll schedule what we call a design meeting, so that now we can, I give them some homework. Here's the things you want to think about. Who's going to take care of your kids if they're young? Who's going to make your healthcare decisions and all those kinds of things? So that's the process. And then we ended up with a signing meeting, which is we sign all the docs. And then if they're doing trusts, which many of them do, we go through a funding process, which is making sure that all of the assets are in the right names and the right buckets. So that's the start to finish kind of the process of it.
Yeah.
Now, that's only the estate planning piece. That's not probate. Yeah. That's not trust administration. Those are all a little bit different because everything's different.
Yeah.
There's some odd stuff that's out there when people pass away, the kind of stuff that they've done, the do-it-yourself stuff that we're trying to figure out how we're going to get this, So we tried. We had a will the other day came in that had been witnessed by a neighbor, which is fine. You need 2 witnesses for a will to be valid. Witnessed by a neighbor and her 2 dogs. It's like,
No.
I don't think that's going to cut it.
Really?
Really.
Would they have paw prints on the line?
She signed their name. So let's say the dog's name was, Fido Jones. So she signed the name Fido Jones.
Right.
And then she just wrote a little paw print, like a little. And I don't know whether she was joking or whether she legitimately thought, but unfortunately, it's not a valid will.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. The stories that you have.
I would say that's the oddest in terms of how.
Yeah.
But there's some really other odd ones that, come across.
Which is why we need someone who is savvy and following the changes and the requirements and all of that and keeping up. And again, you mentioned the litigation or the court experience that you have as a civil litigator. Yeah. Really, you found that has.
It's helped a ton.
Sure it has.
Yeah.
And I don't imagine that all the attorneys in this area of expertise would come with that background.
No, most of them don't. Either they've been an estate planner from the start, or they did real estate transactional work, or, not that many came from any kind of a litigation background.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And how can folks stay in touch with you?
They can drop by and knock on my door.
Yes, good.
Okay. My office phone is 480-491-3216. 480-491-3216. My email at my office is Lou, L-O-U, at Silverman Law, L-A-W-P-C, that's like PeterCharlie.com, silvermanlawpc.com. And then for tie-dye stuff, it's easy, tiedyelawyer@gmail.com.
Perfect.
Just all one word, tiedyelawyer@gmail.com.
And on Facebook, you've got your Facebook page.
I have a Facebook page for myself. And then also my Silverman Law Offices has one.
Okay.
But that's not a fun website,
Yeah,
My
personal one is fun.
My personal website, my Facebook and my Instagram are more fun because I have all the tie-dye stuff. And I'm creating a website, and I'm in the process, and I should have it done in the next few weeks, called tiedyelawyer.com.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
What a surprise, huh?
Yes.
And so that's going to be a process of getting 5 years worth of, photo inventory loaded to figure out how to create a good design so that people can see what their options are.
Yeah.
I don't keep inventory. So if somebody likes it, I say, I'll make something like that. I won't recreate it because I can't.
Yeah. But
you'll like it because it'll look sort of like it.
Yeah.
You know.
And where can we find your tie-dye conversations? That's the name of the podcast. Am I right?
On YouTube, I have a channel called Tie-Dye Dialogues.
Dialogues. Yeah.
Tie-Dye Dialogues. Yeah.
Very good. Well, we'll have to talk off air about how we can help you with some of the goals you have for some of the big names that you have in mind.
I would love it. I do have a few in mind that I'd like to get on the show.
Yeah.
Local and not so local.
Okay. Well, good. I'm hoping to help you with that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it has been a pleasure to get to know you more today, Lou. It's been a lot of fun. You've been listening to Phoenix Business Radio. Again, I'm Karen Nowicki. We've been here with Lou Silverman with Silverman Law. You can find them at silvermanlawpc.com. phoenixpc.com, and of course on all the social media outlets we've just discussed. And yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Phoenix Business Radio X, again, broadcasting out of Mac 6 Conscious Workspace. We're here every day, Monday through Friday. Some media leans left, some lean right, and we lean business. Until next time, I'm Karen Nowicki. Thanks for listening.